Okay, so this is the full draft set review for Aetherdrift, the new Magic set. We use a slightly different review system, something that I came up with specifically to help people describe cards and help you play them your way. So this is the only content that I do that is meant to be recorded. So if you have questions, I will be answering them, but I will do it between slides. So for this one, we use a Scuffle review system. The Scuffle review system, I give everything an overall rating on a scale of 1 to 10. A 1 is a card that you should never play under any circumstances. A 2 is a card you should do your best not to play. A 3 is replaceable. 4s are solid. 5s are strong. You're going to have, like, your goal. Generally, you can get all 5s if in a really good draft. A 6 is a card you always play in a given color or deck, maybe an archetype. A 7 is a reason to be. That color or archetype is something that pulls you in. An 8 is something you're going to do some work to play. You'll change your deck. You'll splash. You will play weaker cards in order to facilitate this 8. A 9 is you're this color now. If you see a 9, you're changing, think of the biggest bombs. And a 10 is a card you will always play no matter what. They're incredibly rare, but they happen. I also give everything a floor rating. That's the worst a card will be. A ceiling rating, the best the card will be. And an amount of effort it takes to bring the card from the floor to the ceiling. So the overall score will usually be something like an average. And the effort value reflects the bridging of the gap. So that's either your, maybe it's a sideboard card, maybe it's takes very specific things to work with it. Maybe it's a counter card to something specific. Maybe it's synergistic and it only works in the right deck. And your goal as a player is to bring your card's values up as much as you can. Use that effort, hit that ceiling. So today, first we're going to go over the mechanics, then all the types that matter in the set, then stats, and then the stats is specifically the removal spells. That's very important when you're drafting to know those stats. Then the overall shape of the format. How are you approaching this draft? What are you thinking about while you're building your deck? What are you thinking about at your pre-release? Then we're going to go through all of the multicolored cards, then the artifacts and lands, and then the other colors. So we're doing the multicolored cards before all the rest of the cards because those are your signposts. They'll tell you what your color pair, what each pair of 2 is trying to do in this format, and how we'll talk about how well they do it. So I will go over a lot of the mechanics when we get to those color pairs. So then we do the 10 different color pairs. So those will take a lot longer than the other cards. All right, up first, vehicles and mounts. So vehicles are artifacts that turn into creatures. They'll have this type line vehicle. If you play it and it just sits there, it is an artifact. So this is 4 mana for a 6/3 with menace. It always has menace, but it's not always a creature. To crew it, you tap any number of creatures whose total power is 3 or more. So you can crew with a 4 power creature, or you can crew with 3 1-power creatures. You can overcrew. There's not usually a reason to, but you can tap your creatures if you need to. So if I have a 3 power creature, I can tap it, and now this is a creature until end of turn. Usually it will play like a size up. This Clamorous Ironclad turns any 3/3 or any 3/1/1s into a 6/3 with menace. That does take me down a creature, and we'll talk about why that's relevant. There's also mounts. So mounts are creatures all the time. They're a lot like vehicles, but they're a creature even if they don't have a pilot, if no one's riding them. So you saddle them, similar to crewing. You tap any number of creatures whose power equals a saddle cost, and usually they say, wow, this creature is saddled, do a thing. The biggest difference between saddle and crew is saddle is sorcery speed only, crew is at instant speed. So in this set, there are 41 total vehicles. They use a lot of them at rares. There's 26 vehicles at common or uncommon. There's a lot of rare vehicles, things that will impact things a little bit differently. There are 12 low risk vehicles. So one of the big problems with vehicles from a design perspective is you need to have something else in play. This Ironclad, this is 4 mana 6/3, is a dud if you have no other creatures in play. If this is the only permanent you have in play, it's a dead card. It's nothing. And if you have a deck with 4 Clamorous Ironclads, in the past, that was a big risk. If you put 4 Clamorous Ironclads into your deck, then they wouldn't do anything. Like, you risked having 3 vehicles in your hand, you'd play out 3 vehicles, and then nothing would happen. And that's bad. That's how you lose a draft. So this set, they've designed very consciously with that in mind. There's a ton of vehicles, but a lot of them are low risk. Either they are, like this Earth Rumbler, exile an artifact or creature from your graveyard, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. So even if you don't have another creature, as long as something died or has died not too long ago, it still will play like a creature. So it's very conscious. There's 12 vehicles that turn themselves into creatures or have cycling or come with the ability to crew themselves. There's 13 mounts in the set. At any rarity, less than a third of the number of vehicles. It's a racing set, so some people get ridden, some animals get ridden, some vehicles get ridden. And there's 11 at common or uncommons. There's only 2 rare mounts. Out of all of them, only 2 require being saddled to be good. So they're very low risk, 2.5. Most of them, so like this Glory Heart Heathlinks, it's a 2 mana 2/3 with lifelink. That's a great stat line. That's something you'd play with no other text. But if you saddle it up with another creature and then attack, then it draws you a card. It goes to get you a plains. So there's only 2 to 3 that are non-functional without saddling. Like, they're not good enough unless you have something riding them. So taken all together, this changes how you have to view creatures. So the vehicles you have to kind of sort in your head into this is a creature or this is a vehicle. This is something different. And then of the things that are pure vehicles without being creatures, your creatures are more valuable. If I have a 3/3 and a 5 and an Earth Rumbler with nothing in the graveyard, then it changes how I have to play this game, because my opponent, if I have to crew this Ranger's Refueler with my Glory Heath Lynx, then suddenly my opponent's deal 3 damage or destroy a target creature can take out 2 bodies if I'm counting on them for defense or offense. It also means that stats matter more than just for attacking or blocking. Like, there's a 3/1 with Defender in this set, which normally that would not be very good, but the fact that it can crew vehicles makes it quite a lot better. Hey Ben, we're doing the set review, so I'm only checking the chat between slides, but it's good to see ya. Their vehicle synergies is going to be something. So Lucky says we should have a vehicle synergy class on this set. We're going to be talking about vehicles and synergy and what it takes to make the vehicles work a lot as we go. This is the overview, but it's going to matter so much. Do be careful with your drafting vehicles. They have diminishing returns. You have an inherent limit on how many vehicles, or if a creature requires saddling to be good, you can put it in the vehicle pile, on how many of these vehicles you can fit into your deck. And you can make up some of the difference. So like this Ranger's Refueler, for an exhaust. So this exhaust you can only use once. We'll talk about that more later. It becomes an artifact creature at a 4/4. So this is a 2 mana 3/3 vehicle, which is okay. Drawing the card is really good. This is a very strong ability, but the fact that it becomes a creature for 6 mana really mitigates a lot of the risk that vehicles have had in past sets. All right, up next, start your engines. So this is a wordy, complicated seeming mechanic. It's going to play much better in practice. It's also going to play much better online. Frankly, I consider this a nightmare to track, even though I think it was going to play really well. But keeping track of it is going to feel awful. So what happens is when you start your engines, anything that has starts your engines when it comes into play. Your speed can be one of 4 values, 1, 2, 3, or 4. It starts at 1. There's one way to make it go down. Don't worry about it. For all intents and purposes, you can't lose speed. It's easier to just think of it that way. Every time you end a turn, one of your turns, that your opponent has lost life, your speed goes up by 1. That wording is very awkward. It basically means when you hit them, your opponent, like in combat is the most common way, you raise your speed by 1 once a turn. But it doesn't happen until the end of your turn. So there's generally 3 categories for start your engines. There's the cards that are inevitable. You'll start your engines, ignore it, play a normal game, develop value from it later. That's this Glitch Ghost Surveyor. It's a 3-mana 2/2 flying. That's good enough on its own. Like, it's very close to good enough on its own. And then it starts your engines, but then at max speed, you exile it from your graveyard to draw a card. That's a nice little bonus. It will matter, but it's not something you need to put conscious effort into maxing your speed out for. It'll just happen. If it happens in 4 turns, you're not going to have time to draw the card with this until 5-6 turns later. So it's in the inevitable category. I put all of this is a cycle, there's one for each color, all of the max speed draw cards into that category. There's the ignores. So those are the things that you start your engines on, and you do not care at all if you get max speed. This Momentum Breaker is a 2-mana enchantment. ETB, your opponent sacrifices a creature or vehicle. And then you can gain life equal to your speed. It's a useful way to start your engines. You don't care about your speed. You just play it when you need to edict them. And then there's the goal cards. So even the goal cards are kind of separated. This Hazoret is terrible if you aren't going for max speed. If you have max speed, it's a 2-mana 5/3 indestructible haste. So it's kind of an all or nothing mechanic. I'm actually going to add that to the bottom because... No, because that's just for with the speed's goal. Like the finish the race cards, that's where it's an all or nothing mechanic. Because like you don't care so much about getting there. But like this Hazoret, if it takes too long, is not going to work. So the red-black cards care about getting to max speed. There are a few, I think there's like 3 cards that do a thing if they're not at max speed. Momentum Breaker gains life equal to the speed. There's a card that you draw X card loses X life, where X is your speed, and then Samut gives +X+O. But they're mostly at rare and mythic. Otherwise, it's you are at max speed or you're not. And then there's cards like this Aether Siphon. Like this is when somewhere between the inevitable ones and the goal ones. You don't really care about... This is a really good win condition in a control deck, but you have plenty of time to get there. You have to figure out whether you want it to be something you build around, and your colors will help a lot on that. We'll talk about that when we get there. It's also a paradoxically slow mechanic. That's going is kind of a failure. This is kind of a failed mechanic. It's cool. It will play really well, but I don't think the flavor matches what it does. Because it's a very, like, the fastest you can do this is 3 turns. And that 3 turn speed will get you to speed 4. And it's more of a way to make the game end at a certain time. Like, the decks that start their engines are the ones that want the game to last longer. Yeah. All right. So Lucky says the speed thing is complicated. It is very complicated, so we're going to go over it again. If you have no speed when you play any start your engines card, then your engines start. Then it does nothing with the cards at all, right? So like you start at 1. If you make them lose life the turn you play it, you can put it to turn 2 to that turn. And if you make them lose life 3 turns in a row, then you will now be at 4 speed, which is your max speed. Yes, you want start your engines to happen as quickly as possible. Okay, so I'm going to do this a few times. Let's talk about Mario Kart. So when you play Mario Kart, at the beginning of each race, you build a car, and your car's different stats. And the stats that people overlook the most are acceleration and speed. Your speed represents your top speed. Your acceleration represents how fast you get there. So start your engines is a mechanic that doesn't do anything until you reach your max speed. It's a very silly mechanic. It's going to be very... So my problems with this are in flavor and in tracking. Tracking it is not fun. It's like tracking day and night, but you have to do it incrementally. And if you forget, you forget. But track it carefully, and it works. It's a really good mechanic that fails logistically, not in play style. On Arena, it's going to be great. I think this is a really cool mechanic to have on Arena. I just want them to change the name. I was convinced after looking at all the cards. They spoiled it. I'm like, this is dumb and bad, and it's not going to play well. This is going to play really well in a lot of interesting ways. It's going to make for a very interesting format. It's so dumb to track. I don't know. I hate that you have to track it separately. But no, it's worth knowing. It's also going to feel very intuitive after you play with it once. But like, it's just a number that you tick up when you deal damage to your opponent, and then you're at max speed. That's it. All right. The rest of the oh, nope. Yeah, let's do the types. All right, so types in the set. Right. That's good. Carl says it's like Infect. Infect doesn't do anything until you're at... So here's a complaint I have. We're back to speed. Infect is a mechanic where when your opponent has 10 poison counters on it, they lose the game. And once you start, it does nothing inherently until you get there. But their design space in Infect is so good. There's cards with power and toughness equal to the number of poison counters your opponents have. There's cards that do different things if once your opponent is at 3 poison counters. Corrupted is a whole mechanic built around that. Start Your Engines doesn't have that. It's just you're at 1 speed, and then 4 speed is what matters. And the thing about the design space of only 0 and 4 speed mattering is it takes away all the incentive to track it in between. I think this is like close. It's really close to succeeding on every levels, but as is, it's something that's very interesting and will play better than you'd expect. All right, types that matter. We're talking about that right now, Lucky. Okay, so types that matter. We talked about vehicles and mounts. There's artifacts. There's pilots. And then minor goblin things. We don't have to... I should have cut that. Okay, artifacts are the most important one. There's a ton of incidental artifacts in this set. So there's only a few cards with affinity for artifacts. It costs 1 less for each artifact you control. This Memory Garden, for instance, if you pay 5 mana for this, bad. If you pay 4 mana for it, okay. 3 mana for it, great. 1 or 2 mana for it is going to feel like you're winning the game. But there are so many artifacts. There's incidental artifacts, there's treasure makers, there's things that make thopters. You can build, like, you don't have to be a full affinity deck for this Memory Garden to be a good card. Pilots is actually a really cool design space. I think they nailed the vehicles for this set. I would not have told you that looking at the spoilers until they were all out, but I really think the vehicles play great. I think it's going to be so cool. And part of the reason for that is pilots. So pilots are 1/1 tokens that saddle or pilot, like they crew the vehicle as though their power were 2 more, 3. And that's important. 3 ends up being the magic number for crewing because of pilots. If you're a dedicated vehicle deck, you will want ways to make pilots. But there are lots of ways to do it. So like this land, Country Roads, makes a white mana, and you can sacrifice to make a pilot. You don't want to be in a position where you're cashing your lands in for pilots, but it's nice. It's a nice option to have. So like this Country Roads is all about whether or not it comes in tapped or untapped, not about whether it not about how badly you need the pilot. So, but if you're a deck with a full of mounts and vehicles, you're going to need the pilot. I like the mechanic, and there's a lot of really cool things that make the pilots. The other types that matter, so vehicles and mounts don't really matter as a type. Like they matter in that you need to know what they do, but there's no destroy target mount. There are lots of destroy target vehicles, and lots of the removal in the set says destroy target creature or vehicle. There are a few goblin synergies at rares. I just want to tell you that goblin decks are possible. If you have a goblin lord rare, you can find the goblins for it. The merfolk synergies are not possible. There is one merfolk in the set. It's really good on its own, and it says put a counter on each merfolk. Like that part is irrelevant. It just grows itself. That's pretty much all the types that matter. Like what matters is vehicle or not, artifact or not. Other mechanics in this set, I will be talking about these mechanics in relation to the cards. We will go, when we get to the cards, we'll talk about them. But just as a quick overview, exhaust, you can do it 1 time. That's what exhaust does. I was skeptical. I now think exhaust is something that will become evergreen. I think that we will see Exhaust move into every Magic set over the next 3 to 5 years. I know that's a long-term prediction, but I'm sick of people being excited about things and saying, "Who saw this coming?" And no, I saw this coming. So 2 mana 2/2, cool card. Target creature gains trample. That would be good enough on its own, but you can pay 4 mana to put 3 counters on it. So it's a 6 mana 5/5 or a 2 mana 2/2. It's kicker that you can do after the fact. There are some cards that say whenever you use an exhaust ability, do a thing, or when your exhaust abilities are cheaper. But the fact is, you can do it one time, and you need to there are things that let you reuse exhaust abilities. It's very cool. There is the other things that matter are cycling. So cycling is the traditional smoothing mechanic. This Gallon Strike is really good. Destroy a target creature with toughness 4 or greater. There's not a ton of targets for this, right? When you need to kill your opponent's Gearseeker Serpent because it's unblockable, you are not having this card will make you lose the game. But there are some decks that will literally have no targets for this. So you get to put this into your deck and then cycle it, discard it to draw a card whenever you can't do it. So you'll notice there's a few other things in the set that there's not quite enough of. So if you are what was the example I had here? If you don't have there's not quite enough fixing. There's not as much fixing as usual. There's not as much removal as usual. You can pad your deck a little bit with cycling cards, and they let you turn time into the ability to dig for more cards. It's going to take some practice, and we'll talk about that. Actually, this is something I will talk about a lot tomorrow because it's easier to do as we're building decks. But cycling, it becomes an important way to fill out time and make things work. Affinity costs 1 less for each artifact you have in play. If you're an affinity deck, that means that you value just having your artifacts in play. And you need to figure out how many artifacts you need in play for you to be happy with this card. Gearseeker Serpent, you're happy to pay 5 mana for this. That means this card is good if you can keep 2 artifacts in play. It also means that there's some inherent value to just like having a treasure token. And then there is a graveyard theme. It's really light. There's not a lot of graveyards mechanics and synergy, but there's a few things that like pay 4 mana, return it from your graveyard to your hand. You're just happy to mill or surveil. And then there's the power of creatures matters a lot for crewing and for saddling, and unblockable matters. Just dealing damage to your opponent or making them lose life on your turn matters a lot because of the ability because of start your engines. If you're trying to rev your engine up to 4, then you'll need ways to punch damage through. All right, so up next we have stats. So in Aetherdrift at common and uncommon, there are 91 total creatures, which is very low, but there are 26 vehicles to make up for that. And of those 26 vehicles, I'd say 12 you can just treat as creatures. There's 24 flyers. There was also 24 flyers in Foundations. I think this is just the new normal. Those are both much higher than usual. There's 7 creatures with reach. All of them are red and green. One of them is green and black. There are 8 combat tricks. That's not crazy low, but it's about 4 tricks lower than usual. There are 6 pieces of recursion. That's things that return things to your hand other than themselves. There's only 1 anthem. That's the lowest ever. I've never had another set with fewer than 2 or 3 ways to grow all of your creatures. So like that, there's no Inspired Charge, there's no Trumpet Blast, there's no Overrun. There's 1 creature that pumps everything. There's 1 rare that can pump everything once. Don't worry about it too much. There's also 1 equipment, which is also a vehicle, but there's no like Bone Splitter. It is really tough to make your individual bodies, like if you have 20 pilots or 20 thoughters, it is tough to make those 20 creatures relevant. There's 10 common dual lands. We have the Gain Life dual lands, and then there are 4 colorless fixers, which is lower than usual. There's 4 ways to fix your mana if you want to splash something powerful without being in green. But there are 24 creatures with 1 toughness, 26 creatures with 2 toughness, 30 creatures with 3 toughness, 21 creatures with 4 toughness, 10 creatures with 5 toughness, 4 creatures with 6 toughness, 1 creature with 7 toughness, 1 creature with 8 toughness, and that's a better spread than usual. Like in Foundations, things are really concentrated at 2 toughness. In March of the Machine, things are really concentrated at 1 toughness, but it's pretty even from 1 to 4. That includes the vehicles which operate as creatures, but not the vehicles which operate as vehicles. So what that means for our removal spells is that the 2 1 damage removal spells that deal 1 damage or give something -1/-1 kill 20% of the common and uncommon creatures in the set. The 4 2 damage removal spells kill 43% of the common and uncommon creatures in the set. It's a little higher than usual. The 2 different 3 damage removal spells kill 68% of the creatures in the set. There's 1 spell that deals 4 damage, but it's at rare and it's a sweeper. But that'll kill 86% of the cards in the set. There's 0 at common or uncommon. There's 2 different 5 damage removal spells for 95% and 2 different 6 damage removals for 98%. So that means that if you're just trying to deal with 2 toughness creatures, you have a lot of ways to do that, but it kills fewer than half of the creatures in the set. But the 2 different 3 damage removal spells are a premium because they kill almost 70% of creatures in the set. In addition to that, there are 4 unconditional removal spells. Just kill a creature, destroy a creature, exile a creature. There are 3 conditional removal spells. There are 2 scaling removal spells. That includes like deal damage, destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater, destroy target creature with flying. There are 4 sweepers, and then 2 of those are rare. So I actually should have said 2 sweepers plus 2 rare. There's 1 edict, your opponent sacrifices a creature. There's 1 bite, there's 1 fight, there's 1 ring, and then another oblivion ring at rare. That's exile target blank until it leaves play. There's 5 tempo cards. So that's tucks, bounces, and stuns. And then there's 1 also at rare. There are 2 counter spells. There are 4 disenchants/shatters. Those are important in a set full of artifacts and enchantments. And there's 1 exchange. You swap creatures with your opponent. There are a few more conditional spells than usual because of the cycling mechanic. There's no like Journey to Nowhere or Oblivion Ring style effect. There's no Pacifism style effect or Charmed Sleep. Enchanted creature stays tapped. There's less removal than usual by a few spells. Okay, so what does all of this taken together mean for how you draft this set? This is the shape of the format. If this is the only part you remember, you'll be okay. So this is a puzzle set, and what I mean by that is you are going to start with some powerful cards, and you'll need to fill in the blanks. You'll need to find your missing pieces. This card's like Canyon Vaulter. When this creature saddles a mount or crews a vehicle during your main phase, that mount or vehicle gains flying until end of turn. That's very good if you have mounts or vehicles. And it is only on your turn, but this is a pretty weak card if you don't do that. 1 toughness is a liability. There's lots of pilots and thopters floating around that will block it. There's a few ways to kill a 1 toughness creature. So this is not a good card unless you are crewing or mounting. So once you have a Canyon Vaulter, you'll need to find those missing pieces. Your cards want specific pieces, and you'll need to balance them together. You'll need to balance the number of vehicles you have or the number of mounts you have with your individual creatures. And you'll find that a lot of your 1 and 2 drops in this set are enablers. They are this 2-mana creature is enabling your other vehicles. You'll have 2 mana Start Your Engine cards that enable the ways you have to punch through. Cards will take more work, including the fast ones. Both in your draft and during gameplay, and then your stats end up mattering for more than just the usual reasons, like more than just combat. The stats on your creatures will matter. You get a little bit of value from the types of your cards, but that will normally contribute to tempo. So like Affinity, you will always be able to play your Affinity cards eventually, but the value in Affinity is playing the artifacts beforehand and then getting it into play. You'll need to think about combat a lot more than usual. Like in a normal Magic set, if I have a 2/2 and you have a 2/2, then all I have to do to calculate whether or not I should attack is the race. It's if you're dealing, like, am I going to be dealing damage to you faster than you're dealing damage to me? And in this set, which I hate. I don't hate the set. I hate that it's not about the race at all. Like, what matters when I have a 2-2 and your opponent has a 2-2 isn't who's winning the race. It's, are you willing to take 2 damage to start your engines, to build up speed? Because it's not just about like my 2-2 and your 2-2. They're going to trade because you do or don't want to take damage. They're going to not trade because you want to deal damage, because you want to rev your engines, not because you want to race me. More so than any Magic set we've ever had, racing doesn't matter. I hate that so much. Sorry, I'm mad about the flavor. Okay, so I got so mad it derailed me a little bit. But you have to plan your combats, because there's value in just dealing damage to your opponent on their turn, and there's value to just having a body outside of life. So if you have a 1/1 in play and your opponent and you're expecting them to play a vehicle, you might not want to. They're not going to want to trade because they might need to crew their vehicle. There's good mana sinks, things like this Pace Setter Paragon. The 3-mana 2/3 with a threat of activation, because that exhaust trigger only gives it double strike until end of turn, but you can still attack with that, and you can just use it if your opponent blocks. So you'll have good ways to use your mana and to use the extra bodies you have later. There's a lot of contextual plays in games in this format. So like this Dune Drifter, 2 mana X, return target artifact creature card with mana value X less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's an okay reanimation spell, and the vehicle 2 mana 3/3 crew 2 is pretty weak. The thing about Dune Drifter is you're incentivized to pick up something that crews it so that you can block with it the turn you play it. Otherwise, you're not affecting the board enough. And what you pick up with this will matter a lot. Like, it's not a reanimation spell in the sense that you always want to get the biggest thing. It changes so much, which is kind of new. Like this, so racing to 4 matters is true, Carl, but not if you're not starting your engines. Like if your opponent hits their start your engines card and you don't hit your start your engines card, even if you're a start your engines deck, then you're on the defensive, even if you're the aggro deck. Because if you get to a late game and your opponent started on a land with start your engines, and then they get to max speed first, well, suddenly none of their lands are dead draws anymore. We'll talk a lot more about that. All right, on to the cards. We're gonna go ahead and run this ad now so I don't get interrupted. All right, any questions that people have while this ad is gone? I do like that it's a combat-oriented set. To start your engine, Lucky. Wait, Lucky, can you hear me? I don't know if you're in an ad. It's gonna be a little like okay, so hey Domino, good to see you. It's gonna be a little like Duskmourn in that that's a really good question. So Domino says, how do you think most games will be won in this set? So this set is people are going to think it's aggressive, but it's not aggressive. But you need to develop quickly. So like the difference between having your Canyon Vaulter on turn 2 and having your Canyon Vaulter on turn 6 is going to be huge. This Pace Setter Paragon, like this attacks really well just because of the threat of activation. But that's only if the threat of activation matters, like if you're pushing through ahead of time. So like it will end in damage, and one of you is always going to be trying to stall at least one aspect of this game, whether it's your opponent's engine or you're trying to just stay alive so you can get your engine up to 4, or you're just trying to make sure you have enough bodies to get your vehicles crewed, is going to be pretty interesting. Life racing is a separate game. Exactly, Carl. So Sabrina asks, how many vehicles should you have on average? It is entirely dependent on your ability to crew them, and you should know whether or not you have so Red Blue has a cycling theme. you can have more Clamorous Ironclads because 1 red mana to cycle is very cheap. But like if you have 3 Clamorous Ironclads in play, you'll lose. But like Earth Rumbler, if this is your only Earth Rumbler, then you get to just treat this as a creature. It's a 5 mana 7/6 with Vigilance and Trample. Because if this is the only thing you have that uses your graveyard, then you can treat it like a creature. If you have 3 of these, you'll need to crew it a lot because you won't have on turn 5, you can probably have a creature or artifact in your graveyard to crew this every turn. On turn, if you have 3 of them, then no. So you get to treat your vehicles like half a creature for the first 3 or 4 creatures, and then you're gonna have to start treating them like spells. But if you have like protected creatures, good ways to crew them, then you get to have more vehicles. Because like if you can keep 1 creature alive, it can keep crewing the same vehicles, which are trading off. But it doesn't really help you go wide, right? Vehicles as creatures, you can't go around things. I agree with you, Carl, except Corrupted was the inherent thing that happened at 30% poison. There is nothing, not one thing that happens at 30% speed. All right, so ads over, onto the cards. All right, up first, we have Guidelight Pathmaker. So the blue-white mechanic is just general artifacts. There is an aspect of like vehicles, because all vehicles are artifacts. And there's also a value aspect. So there's lots of things that are inherent 2-for-1s. Guidelight Pathmaker, for instance. So I gave Guidelight Pathmaker a 4 with a floor of 3, a ceiling of 7, and a medium effort. And the trick to the Pathmaker is if it's not a creature the turn you play it, you will feel so behind. Like if it's a 6 mana 6/5 that also fabricates, that's pretty good. But it's not. It's a 6 mana fabricate that becomes a creature later. You need to have things that crew it reliably, and that's not terribly easy in blue-white. But once you have it, it gets really strong. It's all about what you can get with the Pathmaker. So you're either getting a big, impactful, game-changing artifact into your hand, or you're playing a 6/5 because you got an artifact creature with mana value 2 or less that can crew it. There are only 3 of those. In blue and white, there's only 3 uncommons, 1 common, 2 uncommons, might be 2 commons, 1 uncommon, that crew the Pathmaker and put it into play. And that option is what makes it a good card. Because if you tap it on turn 6 against an empty board, you need this to be a creature that blocks. But if you have the ability to go get that creature, then it safely blocks. Because even if they try and kill your creature, you crew it, and now you have a blocker for the turn. And if they try and kill your Pathmaker, you still have your 2-power creature for the turn. So it gets better the better the things you have to go get it. But that floor is pretty low. I wouldn't pick it too high, but if I'm already blue-white and I already have the artifacts, I'll be really happy to have it. The perfect situation for a Guidelight Pathmaker is if you're a blue-white artifact deck with lots of vehicles and you want to play the 2-drops. There's a few good ones that are really good in the artifact deck. There's a 2 mana 2/1 that taps for mana for artifacts. Then you're going to be happy to have the Pathmaker. But you want those cards to not only be fetchable by the Pathmaker. Like it's a 7 if you have a bomb artifact, a rare artifact creature at 2, and a rare artifact at 2, things that you want to put directly into play. Really cool card. It makes me kind of excited to play this set. I'd have to count again. It's only commons and uncommons. Also, hi Ranger. All right, up next, Voyage Home. This card is a doozy. So you are happy to pay 4 mana to draw 3 cards and draw 3 life. If you pay 2 mana to draw 3 cards and gain 3 life, you'll feel like you're winning the game. I gave it a floor of a 4, assuming that you have 1 or 2 incidental artifacts. That ceiling of a 7 is if you can consistently have 5 artifacts. That means if you have treasures or Thopters, there's like a few cards that make a bunch of Thopters. This is also a very splashable card. Like blue-green will usually want to splash Voyages Home. They make lots of Thopters and treasures. Maybe red-green can double splash. There's a lot of treasure makers in red. Really cool card and constructed playable probably all the way back to modern Probably not Legacy, but I think Modern will play Voyage Home because they have Mox Opals. Yeah, I gave it a 6 with a 4/4 ceiling of 7. If you can make, if you can pay 4 mana for this, you're happy. Like if you can get 3 artifacts into play. You might be right, Ranger. I did it by I sorted by powers, so I'll go take a look. Haunt the Network. So you make 2 Thopters and then drain them. If you drain them 2, then you're happy. Then you're not happy. Like this is a terrible card if you drain them 2. If you drain them 3, it's okay. If you drain them 4, it's okay. Even at 5, it's still okay. This is a good card when you're draining for 6, 7, 8, which is totally doable. It takes so many artifacts to make this work that I would be hesitant to first pick it. But Double Thopter is nice. This is also a deck. Like, if you build a control deck with artifacts and 3 or 4 of these, you're going to be very happy. But the Thopters don't do a good job crewing, and there's not a good way to turn them into value easily. So, like, in other sets, this card would have been fantastic. In this set, the Thopters don't do quite enough. So you have to put the work in to make them do it. But that ceiling of an 8, I gave it a ceiling of an 8 because I do think this, you can build around this. Like, you don't slot this into the blue-black control deck for free, but you can build a dedicated blue-black artifact deck with Haunt the Network, and it'll perform really well. Yeah, I'll check in a bit, Ranger, but you're probably right. There is a creature that crews with defense. I went in reverse order this time and started with green. All right, Haunted Hellride. So this is a pretty cool card. So one of the major costs of vehicles is if I crew the vehicle, attack with the vehicle, well, I have tapped 2 bodies now. So the Haunted Hellride, it can untap itself and be a 4/3 Death Touch, or you can untap the creature that crewed it, and now it'll block really well. It's a cool card in a blue-black vehicles deck. But Death Touch isn't inherently valuable in this set. There's no like there is one creature that when it dies, it deals 1 damage to the thing. So in Duskmourn, we had a card whenever a creature attacked alone, it gets +1/+0 Death Touch. There were lots of like Fear of Lost Teeth. It would die and ping, and it would auto kill a creature. The thing about Haunted Hellride that makes it solid is it's a vehicle with a reduced crew cost. So like it's got crew 1, but it can always untap the creature that crewed it. So it's not it's a 3/3 vehicle that doesn't leave you down a body when you use it. I gave it a 4/5 with a 4/4 and a ceiling of 6. It's gonna be good in a blue-black vehicles deck. It's gonna be good when you need to force some creatures through. The more expendable creatures you have, like if you are using your Thopters, it does let you punch through damage. But overall, it's like you need to be the right deck for it, but I do think it'll play really well. Yeah, I think it's pretty good, Carl. Like, vehicles, all of the vehicles that limit the risk you inherently take on for having a lot of vehicles are things that I rated a little higher as far as vehicles go. Because there's a lot of things that want you to have vehicles. Apocalypse Runner. So red-black, the theme is this is getting a revisit. So the theme is start your engines aggro. So really what that means is their start your engines cards are good, and their ability to rev the engines to make your opponent lose life is good. This is a good example. So either you can crew it with the 3-power creature, or you can make a 2-power creature unblockable. I'm going to go ahead and lower this to a 4. The runner is is a good way to punch through damage, but after looking at all the other cards, it's more fragile than I thought. Like a 4-mana 6/5 with a crew 3 cost is really high, and 4 mana is more than you want to pay to make a 2-power creature unblockable until end of turn. But in a red-black deck that's trying to snipe damage through for the purposes of starting your engines, it's solid. It's just not great. It is huge. If you have pilots or specific creatures that there's not as many creatures that it's like whenever this creature deals combat damage, do the thing, as I wanted there to be. But there's a few, and I think that'll make it worth it. This is not a vehicle that circumvents the vehicle risk. Now, lifelink can be on black creatures. Black is number 2 for lifelink. So making a creature with power 2 or less unblockable is red, and giving it lifelink is black. So this is a good red-black tap effect. It does feel weird that it's on an Apocalypse runner. All right. Up next, Gastel Thrillseeker, one of the best uncommons in the set. So 2 mana, 2/3. This is good enough. When it enters, deal 1 damage to target opponent and you gain 1 life. This says start your engines. This is the only card in the set that puts you to speed 2 by itself on turn 2. If you play this card on turn 2, it deals the damage. You're at 1 speed. At the end of the turn, you go to 2 speed, even if the Thrillseeker dies. It is why you are black and red, and it is what makes speed better, because this is one of the only, like, you can play one of the lands on turn 1 to start your engines, and then play a 2 drop that deals damage on turn 2. This is just as good as that. Even if your engines are already going, you get to play it later. And then if you're already at max speed when you play it, then it attacks. Like, Death Touch is a good thing to have on a 2-drop. This is one of the best cards. Like, this is the reason you go black-red, is the Thrillseeker. You go start your engines, and you take all the Thrillseekers you can find. Isn't it crazy? There's nothing else that's like start your engines, deal 1 damage. I think it's because it's kind of unintuitive. This starts on speed 2. This is not a lot of rare, like, burn. This is the only start your engines burn spell that hits a player, at least before like 5 mana, I think. All right, so so here's one of the fundamental problems with start your engine, Sabrina. So Sabrina says, if it's not getting it in your opening hand, fine. So when you're a start your engines deck, you need like 7 to 10 cards to start your engines, because not having a start your engines card in your opening hand is a loss. You have lost that game. That's bad design, but it's fine. If you'll need these. Like, you need 3 to 5 of these. You need the ones. There's lands that do it. There's a few lands, start your engines on turn 1. Those are very good for it. Like, you can do it, but that's what when I say it's your goal. The inevitable ones, you'll get there. The ones that you don't care about starting your engines are going to be fine either way. The ones that are your goal go into a deck with like 7 to 10 ways to start your engines. So Ranger, it does do 2 to everybody, but you have to play the card to start your engines and pay the mana to sacrifice it. So it still takes you 2 turns to rev your engines that much. This one deals the damage on ETB. It's a good card, the one you're talking about. All right, so the red-green mechanic is... so exhaust is in every color, but red-green specifically facilitates exhaust and has stronger exhaust cards. Boom Scholar is a really good card. Like, so it's a 3 mana 3/3 that's almost good enough on its own. In this set, 3 toughness is good. There's a lot of deal 2s. The exhaust ability is great. It becomes a 5/5 and everything else gets trample. And then it also, that's a lot of mana. There's a lot of like 3 mana exhaust, 4 mana exhaust, red, green, 4 exhaust. So reducing the cost by 2 drastically increases how strong a lot of the cards in this deck are. It's usually going to play near that floor of a 6. That's assuming you have a few other exhaust things. If you are a dedicated exhaust deck, it's going to be close to that ceiling of a 7. And so kind of a lot of work to get it up to a 7, but I'll pick it as a 6 pretty happily. It's very strong. There's Sabrina, there is no blinking in the set. There's a few bounce spells. All right, up next, Rocketeer Boost Buggy. So this is what I was talking about when I say vehicles that you get to play as creatures. So a 2 mana 3/2 vehicle that makes a treasure on attack is good enough. That would be solid on its own. You can pay 3 mana to make it a 4/3 the next turn, or you can pay 5 mana to make it a 4/3. Like, this is such a flexible vehicle that plays like a vehicle. But if you have nothing to crew it with, your fail case of paying 3 mana into it is kind of awesome. Also, your opponent doesn't get to kill it with sorcery speed interaction until it's a creature. A treasure is worth a whole card in a lot of contexts in this format. There's not a lot of good fixing or ways to splash. There's lots of good ramp. There's lots of good ways to use mana. There's lots of ways to use individual artifact tokens. So the boost buggy is really strong on its own. That floor of a 5 is if you are just using it as bodies. That ceiling of a 7 is if you're a more ramp and vehicle oriented deck. But really cool card. So like it kind of does everything. It makes your artifact tokens. It has an exhaust ability, which it makes treasures. It is a vehicle. It is an artifact. And artifacts that make artifacts are also very good in this set. So I gave it a 6, floor of a 5, ceiling of 7, and medium effort to bridge that gap. Right, Sabrina. So Sabrina, max speed only matters when you need it to matter. And a lot of the cards that you need it to matter for will get you there on their own eventually. So the black-red specifically wants to get there as fast as possible. Everyone else gets there when they get there. All right, up next, green-white. So green-white is mounts specifically. Most of the mounts in this set are in green-white. And most of the mounts in this set, so there's 3 mounts out of the 12 at common or uncommon that if you don't crew them, they're worthless. This one technically is worth it if you don't saddle it, but it's really worth it. It's a 2 mana 1/1 that puts down 2 counters on attack in the air. Really strong. One thing you'll notice is that a lot of the most problematic creatures start with 1 toughness and then get stronger over time. And that's important because you'll need to carefully manage when they get stronger, because there's good pingers in this set. There's good ways to deal 1 damage to a creature. There's Thopters in the set. So this gets around the Thopters with 1 attack. But it's also just so efficient. Like a 2 mana 1/1 flyer that grows 2 power every turn. Like you have to divvy it out. It's very strong. It doesn't even have to be the creature that saddled it. It's any creature. It's Toxic Ranger. It's really good, but it is fragile. There's a lot of good ways to deal with it in this set too. So like in other sets, I probably would have even given it a higher rating. In this set, it's a 6 with a floor of 5, ceiling of 7. It's there are decks where it's not great because it doesn't crew vehicles well or saddle things very well, but as a recipient, it's so strong. It doesn't work with the vehicles. It's just part of that balancing act. You need enough vehicles so you always have things to grow, but not so many that you can't saddle this, or that because it's incompatible with some of the other vehicles. The 2 and 3 power vehicles, you have to grow this first. But yeah, once it starts getting in, it just takes the game over. Veteran Beast Rider. This card is so efficient. Like it's a 3 mana 3. I would play a 3 mana 3/4 in this set. Like there's nothing that deals 4 damage, but it dodges Lightning Strike and Grim Bobble. This threat of activation is so good. It's the only anthem at common or uncommon. This is the only way at common or uncommon to make all the little creatures you have relevant. And you get to crew everything on your turn and still untap your creatures, or saddle things on your turn and still untap your creatures. Like this gives every creature in play vigilance and makes every creature in play a threat. And it does include vehicle untapping as long as you do it on your turn, because your vehicles are creatures on your turn. But yeah, this card is absurdly pushed. I'm a little stunned that they would do this for 3 mana. This feels like a 4 mana spell. But you should, if you get past 1, you should probably move into green-white. If you are green-white, this is your most important card. It is first pickable, and it takes games over so fast. Like I gave it a higher rating than Lagarin, and Lagarin is so strong. But yeah, I gave it a 7. That floor of a 6 is if you don't have a ton of bodies, if it's just a normal card. That ceiling of an 8 is in any green-white deck, and it is going to be worth... It's not worth building a tokens deck, right? Like it's not worth building a deck full of Thopters and Pilots on purpose without this card, which means that it's like not guaranteed to pump a team full of bodies. But if you are in that deck, it becomes very strong. Really cool card overall. That's not so cool. Really pushed card overall. Hey, Ghost Code, good to see ya. All right, so Green Black has a graveyard theme. There's not a lot that actually uses the graveyard, but there's a lot of good ways to enable the ones that do. So I like this card. One thing we talk about a lot in Magic is how many cards is Surveilling worth. A lot of people think that Surveil 1, when you care about your graveyard, is worth half a card, and I think that's true. Like, less so on turn 2, but by the time you get to turn 5, 6, 7, 8, that Surveil is going to feel really good. Not drawing a land when you really need to not draw a land is pretty valuable. And then this just sits in play and picks up a creature or vehicle when you need it to. There are really good reanimation targets at common and uncommon. So this is a dedicated green-black card. I wouldn't necessarily run it, like it wouldn't necessarily pull me into green-black, but I always play it when I'm green-black. And then once I have rares worth reanimating, I'll play this happily every time. That's a very long answer, Sabrina. You'll need to ask that a little later, but please remember the question. All right, so one of the cards that you can pick up as the Broodheart engine is the Broodwagon. Like, so this is a prohibitive cost if you're not a dedicated green-black deck. Like, this is not a card you can splash easily. But the cycling is really, really good on this. On turn 6, killing a creature with your 6/5 Menace Reach, so good. But you can cycle it and then reanimate it also. This is what green-black wants to be doing. I gave it a floor of a 4, ceiling of a 7. It's going to be a 7 if you're in a green-black deck. But you have to know your green-black, and hopefully you'll get a big pile of these. But one of the main issues you'll find a lot in these green-black, like, mid-rangey or grindier decks is you'll have all these 5 and 6 drops and then no room for it. You can play 5 Thundering Broodwagons in your deck because it cycles. Crew 3 is Rough Rangers. Cycling is what saves this card. So, like, the conditions that need to come together for this card to be good are you need really good mana, you need black, black, green, green, you need Crew 3 for it. You need your opponent to have a good target here, which your opponent's always going to have a good target. Your opponent will always have a good target for a Thundering Broodwagon in this set. The reason that it's got a low effort and is going to play close to that 7 instead of that floor of 4. So generally, this kind of card will have a floor of 4 and a ceiling of 7 in any set, right? A removal spell attached to a big conditional body. But this is a removal spell attached to a big conditional body with cycling. That's so important, Ranger. Like, the cycling, when you don't have the ability to crew this, or their opponent doesn't have a target, is so valuable, especially in a color pair designed to reanimate. Yeah, they messed this design up a lot. I think they nailed it on this one. I want to go back and answer Sabrina's question at the halfway point. We're a little past that. All right, so Sabrina says, how would you deal with like a green-white deck? How good is it? The thing about the green, there's no Snakeskin Veil, right? Like it's hard to protect your creatures. You have to just kill this. Your opponent, green-white doesn't have an endless pile of relevant creatures. Green-white has a few very important creatures and a few creatures that don't matter. Actual removal spells is how you deal with that deck. That's a very short answer. The full answer to that is something we're going to have to explore as we draft. But if you come back tomorrow, we'll talk about it, because I think early on we're going to see a ton of Naya decks. I don't think Naya is the best set of decks, but I think red-green and green-white and red-white are the most consistent and easiest to draft decks. So you'll see them a lot more. But if you know the set well enough to draft a green-black deck or a blue-black deck or a red-black aggro deck, you will win. As long as your opponent doesn't have 3 of 4 of these. All right, Rangers Aetherdrift. 3 mana, 3/5, crew 1 is almost good enough. It's okay. If you get 1 exhaust ability off, that crews itself. So like this is close to being a self-sufficient vehicle. You do need exhaust abilities, But that's all you need, and you only need a few. Blue-green is billed by Wizards this set as Exhaust Ramp. It's kind of just a synergy set, or a synergy set of colors. So like you need to figure out how much you're exhausting or crewing or saddling or just generating value. You don't have to really ramp, but it's more going to feel like a puzzle when you're building blue-green. Like if I have 3 of the Rangers Aether Hives, I'm going to want more exhaust cards. I'm going to pick them higher. And like when you ramp, you're not necessarily ramping into giant threats. You're ramping into the ability to pay 6 mana to exhaust your 5/5 into an 8/8, or 4 mana to exhaust your 2/2 into a 5/5. But the Aether Hive is really cool because you can it's easy enough to make Thopters to crew it on your turn and on your opponent's turn. Thopters are way better than servos. I'm sorry if you're here, servo. But yes, 1/1 flyers are very, very good in the set. There's a lot of cheap flyers that you really want to get Thopters in front of, like the Sky Serpent Seeker. So this actually would have been higher in other sets. This is a 2 mana 1/1 flying Death Touch. Essentially, you pay 4 mana to make it a 2/2 and put 2 lands into play. This is important because of Thopters. There's a lot of Thopters in this set. Being able to do this at instant speed really limits what your opponent can do to kill this, because this is a fragile creature. It's a 2 mana 1/1 flying Death Touch. In a lot of sets, that would be good enough by itself. In this set, there's lots of ways to punish 1 toughness creatures, which is why paying 4 mana to just draw 2 cards is absurd. And these lands are relevant. Like in some sets, the 2 extra lands like aren't going to be relevant. In this set, you will use a lot of mana. So grabbing 2 lands is very strong. It's 2 random lands, but that's fine. And being a 2/2, jumping just 1 toughness is very important. Like dodging your opponent's pings on this with 4 mana is really good, and that threat of activation is important too. It means that being a 2/2, even for 4 extra mana, means your opponent can't chump with 1 Thopter. So I gave it a 7 with a ceiling of 7. It's usually going to play near that ceiling, and a floor of 4. But you have to be conscious of the removal spells in this set that deal 1. There are no blinks Wing Spear. At least there might be mythic or rares. I haven't checked the mythics, but at rares, common and uncommon, there's no blinks. And there's no blinks, and there's 1 bounce spell. You can exhaust an instant speed domino, which is why the threat of activation on this is so important. Also, hi, Wing Spear. All right, boosted sloop. So blue-red is billed as cycler aggro. This is like the passive on this of you get to loot 1 is solid, but it's also a little redundant. So you don't have to pick it that high in blue-red. Like this card is solid, but it's replaceable. There are some things that say whenever you discard a card or that care about things in your graveyard, then this jumps a lot. But it doesn't pull you into the color pair quite as well as the other colors. If you are blue-red, you'll play it really happily. If you're not, you don't necessarily go into blue-red for this loop. Correct. And the passive is relevant, but the blue-red cards have so much cycling already. Like the card, it's not that the card selection is bad, it's that there's so much available card selection. So in some sets, so this ability, when you attack with looting, drawing a card and discarding a card, is an incredibly valuable thing to have, but at a certain point it's less relevant. So the reason that this is only a 5 and not higher is that cycling and looting and rummaging is so prevalent in this set, you don't need to pick cards specifically for that purpose as high. It is a good card, but it's tough to... Vehicles are tough in aggro decks. Blue-red is very aggressive. Vehicles are counter to that. Like a vehicle or 2 is very good in an aggressive deck because it gives everything kind of pseudo haste. When I play my random creature on turn 4, I get to crew, and it's kind of like it had haste, but they've got diminishing returns. So I gave it a 5, floor of 5. It's usually going to play near that floor in just the right deck, or if you're missing this effect, it's going to be picked closer to that ceiling of 7. It says that Pirates is like the sub-theme, but I didn't see a lot of cards that cared about Pirates specifically. Yeah, here. So look, Wingspear, we're comparing it here. Broadside Barrage. So 5 damage in this set kills 95% of the creatures. So this is kill a creature, loot at instant speed. This is very good. It's not complicated. If you're blue-red, you play this. Is very good removal, but it's a much more straightforward card. And like, I'll take Broadside Barrage over Boosted Sloop pretty much every time. There's so many cards that just have this tacked on. I like this card though. See, this to me is like a really cool, this is what Magic does. Like, this is very clearly the moment when you are racing, the pirates pull up beside you and they fire the cannons off the side. But it's not so on the nose as some of the other things. I like this card. I like the flavor of it, the feel of it. Like, it's a moment. It's a less pushed moment. I'm trying to find some other examples. I like Broadside Barrage more than something like with an exclamation point at the end. If that makes sense. I mean, that's the problem, Car. Hey, Hugh. Thank you. But you'll splash this. Splashing is tougher for blue than it is for red in this set. So like most of the red decks will also splash this. The blue decks are going to have more trouble splashing this. Grixis Control will be a thing. This card's just very good. It's one of the better removal spells. It might even be a 7. I don't think it's a 7. It's tough for me to put things at 7 that aren't like, I'm these colors now. A Temur Exhaust, 3 colors is doable but difficult. The fixing is not clean in this set. Yeah, okay, so Temur Exhaust deck. So the fixing in this set, there's a 4 or 5. Hang on, I gotta go check the stats. There's only 4 sources of colorless fixing, and they're not fantastic. But there are 10 common dual lands. So if you have there's the gain life lands. So because they're specific pieces of fixing, it's a little tougher, but it's not impossible to go 3 colors. This is going to be more of a 2-color set than most of the ones we've seen recently, but splashing is doable. All right, so red-white, the Boros deck, the Boros colors in this set are vehicle aggro. So like it's more like red-blue is cycling aggro, red-white is vehicle aggro, but it's not really aggro. Like they bill it as aggro, but it's more like creature value. It's about the momentum that you build up by playing your things in the right order. So this Cloudspire Coordinator is a really good example. Like a 2-mana 3/1 that scries 2 on ETB, that's good enough. We don't need the rest of this text. But every once in a while, the ability to just make a pile of pilots is really nice. Like if this taps to make 1 pilot, that's pretty good value. And we've seen things kind of like this in the past. So Wizards has gotten much better at designing vehicle sets. This isn't the first vehicle set. Oh, I would love to cast 2. So there, yes, you will cast 2 every once in a while. There are a lot of good, very cheap vehicles in Mount's Wingspear. So like we looked at this white. I think this white mount is so good. This Glory Heath Lynx, like it's a 2-mana 2/3 lifelink mount. These kinds of things will happen in this, like ideally in this kind of deck. The cool thing about this one is, let's say I have a mount in play or a vehicle in play and a Cloudspire Coordinator in play. Usually the tap abilities don't get used in a vehicle deck. But if I play another vehicle and then tap this to make the pilot it makes cruise with the same amount of power that the coordinator does. So it's an ability you actually get to use. Like in the past, like in Kaladesh, you would have these situations where you'd have to choose between tapping your mana dork for mana or using your mana dork to crew a vehicle. and the coordinator does it all. But it's a little work. Like that floor of a 5, that's if this is a 2-mana 3/1 scry 2. That ceiling of a 7, that's if this is a 2-mana 3/1 that generates some pilots. It's really good. Nah, it's an uncommon wing spear, but we see more uncommons than commons now. All right, up next we've got the other red-white signpost. 4-mana 2/3. This card is just very efficient. Like this is a 4-mana 4/5 flying vehicle, but the ability to divvy that power is pretty nice. You can I didn't realize it was other. I read it as among 1 or 2 target creatures. But it's other. So we're going to go ahead and lower that floor to a 4, but we're keeping that 5 because it's still 4 mana for 4/5 worth of power, and that crew cost is pretty low. You have a lot of creatures who you want to get a little more power on in red-white, so I really want to play it in red-white, but I won't necessarily be branching out into other colors for it. But cool card, good in red-white, not good elsewhere. All right, Dune Drifter. All right, you know what? We have an ad in 90 seconds that's mandatory, so I'm going to go ahead and run the ad now and get more water. I wanted to finish all the multicolored cards. We're going to run the ad now, and I'll be back in 90 seconds. So if you're watching this on YouTube, fast forward 90 seconds and if I haven't gotten the edited out. And if I have gotten the edit out, then I will I'll take out me explaining this too. All right, 90 seconds. Be right back. Bye. Be right back. I need more water too. I wanted to finish all the multicolored cards and then do the ad break, but yeah, whatever. This works just fine. Oh, thanks, Sabrina. You're sweet. All right. So up next, we've got Dune Drifter. Oh my god, I revisited this one 5 or 6 times. Because on the surface, this is a really good card. The deeper you go, the more difficult this is. So let's take off this ability for a second. If it's white-black for a 3/3 Crew 2 vehicle, that's not good enough. Vehicles need to do more than be stats, or they need to add a lot of stats. Like if this is a 2-mana spell that gives your 2-power creature +1/+1, that's just not good enough. So at what point does the spell aspect become worth it? Well, if I'm paying 5 mana to res a 3-power creature and get a 3/3 vehicle, that's solid. If I'm paying 4 mana or 3 mana, it's not great. So this is a higher effort card because what you get back has to be relevant. It has to be something strong for whatever you're doing right now. I do love that it is a vehicle that essentially crews itself because there are 2-power creatures for 1 mana in this set, and most of the 2-mana creatures also have 2 power. So the ability to pay 4 mana and block with this is really good. weirdly, it's kind of disposable. Like, you want this to be a 2-for-1. It doesn't need to be a crazy 2-for-1 to be strong. But, like, in terms of flexibility, the flexibility isn't worth the rate. So it comes down to what you can get back to it. But we're in the play booster era, and this is a puzzle set. The ability to pick up the missing pieces for your game plan is something valuable. The ability to pick up your mount, or the thing that makes the pilots, or the thing that furthers your engine plan, is where it's powerful. So the flexibility on this is in what you can recur. That's why I gave it a low floor. You need to know what you want to get back and how that thing is getting into your graveyard early. So if I have a 3-1, like, it's great with lots of the 3-1s in this set, because those are cards that you want to trade off, or like there's a lot of things that generate value. So as a potential thing, this Glory Heath Links, this card is really good. We'll talk about that more when we do the white cards. A 2/3 lifelink that draws a card when it's saddled is very good. Your opponent is incentivized to trade their creature with it, or to kill it as quickly as they can, and then now you can pick it up. And you can pick it up and create a value loop with it. It's a cool card. But you need to be... The ETBs aren't free in this set. There's lots of attack triggers. You need to know what you want to recur with it, and then it's good. So yeah, I gave it a floor of 4 with a ceiling of 7. It's easy to play with. It's not easy to draft with. It's also a good splash. Like, a green-black deck splashing Dune Drifter is real. Like, this is a really good card in the green-black deck. Embalmed Descendant. This is another one that I came back to a few times. So this one is good for start your engines in the long term. It's kind of a free thing. 3 mana for a 3/4 spread across 2 bodies is solid. This max speed is kind of just a bonus. It is... Black-white is not inherently good at getting to max speed. That's not true. Black-white is very good at getting to max speed eventually. It's incredibly bad at it slowly. It's great at getting there quickly. It's bad at doing it fast. I'm mixing up everything right now. It takes a while for black-white to get max speed. We did it. It happens eventually. So black-white gets a lot of value out of, like, the creatures that exile from your graveyard to draw a card when you have max speed. This is a good example of that. It's also one of the few ways to turn your bodies into something relevant eventually. Thank you, Ranger. I appreciate your support. This would be better with more blinks. It would be better with more crew 1s. This is part of that puzzle set aspect. So, like, this is a really cool card if you have crew 1 vehicles and crew 2 vehicles, because now you can crew them both. And that's better for you than a 3-mana 3/3, right? It's lots of disparate pieces on this card. So it takes some work to make the disparate pieces come together. But black-white is pretty good, at assembling these disparate pieces. So between black and white, you touch on nearly every mechanic. You'll touch on vehicles. You'll touch on the graveyard. You'll touch on mounts. You touch on having lots of bodies. So this does all the jobs okay. And ideally, if this is the best card when you're truly spread across the archetypes. So if you are truly torn between start your engines and tokens and vehicles, that's when this card is best. When you're focused in on, if you're a black-white deck, you might still just be a dedicated vehicles deck or a dedicated graveyard deck, and then this card is a little bit worse. It's still a reasonable rate for 3 mana, so I gave it a floor of a 4, and that ceiling of a 7 is if you're split. Like, if you're split between all the different archetypes, then you can play 4 copies of this card, and it's going to be the best 3-drop available to you. But if you're dedicated vehicles or dedicated recursion, you're going to have better replacements for it, which is cool. I think that's really good design. I'm so torn. Like, this set has so many things that are really cool, interesting, limited design, and so many things I'm like, not... Why? Why did you do it that way? Like, I fully believe that this would have been an all-timer if they had, like, an extra 6 months to work on it. All right. Aether Jacket. This is the cool one. 3-mana, 2/1 Flying Vigilance. It's okay. It's almost there. It attacks in the air and still crews on defense. You'll find that a lot of vehicles are good on blocks. So like being able to attack Vigilant in the air and crew the blocker is solid. This text, everyone has artifacts. Shatter is good enough to play in this set. Lucky says this set looks complicated. It'll be okay. Like, I am giving you the deep, nitty-gritty ways to recover and your fail cases and your ways to pull the most value out of little things. And that's not going to matter all the time. You knowing everything I say here is not, I don't know everything I'm saying here, right? But it's not about, hey, you should memorize how to draft every card in the set. It's about, hey, you know what? Scuffle said that destroying artifacts is a thing that I should be able to do, and I didn't get any ways to do that. I think I'm going to put an Aether Jacket into my deck. Correct. Like, it's not an ideal, this is not the best way to do this thing, but the different aspects of it make it good enough. Like, this is a filler card. When you really need to destroy an artifact, it'll play at that, you pick it as a 5, but it's a filler 3-drop. Like, we have filler 3-drops in every set, but think about the filler 3-drops we usually have. Like, the dog, the 3-mana 3/2 Surveil 2 artifact creature. Like, that was niche playable, not good, just playable. This card is niche playable, but it's a better niche playable than we usually get in this slot in the set. So yeah, it's a cool card. I'm not saying put it in every deck, just don't write it off. Like, you need a couple flyers, you need a couple ways to crew vehicles, you need a couple ways to deal with your opponent's large vehicles. This is a bad job of all of that, but you need that job filled. There are 82 artifacts in this set. Most people will have a target for it, and having your artifact removal spell be a creature until they do is nice. This is also one of those cards that's going to have value that you don't get to see right away. Like, you play this card, your opponent might not play their vehicle on turn 4. Yes, your archetypes are good. So if you're really feeling overwhelmed, Lucky, avoid black. I think black, white, and blue, black are going to be the hardest archetypes to draft. But like red, white, green, blue, and the Naya archetypes are the easiest to draft. And they're still going to be interesting. They have more interchangeable pieces. So like green, white, your cards are fairly interchangeable. Like, if you don't have to be a mount deck to make Lagarin good. You don't have to be a tokens deck to make Veteran Beast Rider good. It's just good. You don't have to be an exhaust deck for a Boom Scholar to be good. But if you're not an artifact deck, then you're not going to be happy to play Voyage Home. I think black's really good in this set. The cards just aren't flexible. We've been seeing that more and more too. Please say that again at the end, Carl. We're going to talk about that at the end of this. So, well, the stream's not going to end with the end of this set review. All right. Up next, we have the Camera Launcher. So this is a cool card. I like this. This is another filler 3-drop. But like 3-mana 2/2 bad. 6-mana 3/3 Thopter bad. But if you're the exhaust deck, this card's very good. Like, if you get to Boom Scholar, then now you're paying 4 mana for a 4/4 that is 2 artifacts. And it has a place. I will be sideboarding this. Like, so at your pre-release, this is probably not a card that's worth main decking, but there's so many 1 toughness flyers that you want to be able to block that you may end up bringing it in anyway. Otherwise, this is really a red-green card. Like, this is a really good card. If you have 2 Boom Scholars, this is a free activation. If you're blue-white or red-green, I'll play this. I think this is a 5 in red-green with Boom Scholars specifically. If you are blue-white, this is a 4, and everywhere else, this is a 3. But really cool design. I like this. Guidelight Matrix. This one's getting a revisit. So this is another card that does a job everywhere. Um, like it drawing a card when it comes into play is just something that your affinity decks want. It's not going to do as good a job of saddling a mount or crewing a vehicle as a pilot would, but it did draw a card. It's a it's a little bit mana intensive. So this how good this card is directly related to how good your vehicles are and what the cost of crewing or saddling them is. A lot of them you would rather have a creature do this, but it does draw you a card and sit and play, and it's a lot less fragile than your creatures are. So like this is a way to keep your vehicles crewed that doesn't die to removal. It's pretty cool. I think the format is slow enough for this card, but I also think like your exhaust deck isn't gonna have extra mana lying around to do this. I think it's really good in green blue. And there's a lot of places where there's a lot of rares that want this. There's a lot of rares that make you jump through crazy hoops to crew them. And this is the hoop. This is the hoop you have to jump through. Cool is a cool card. We may find out that like it's so contextual based on what else you have. Like if I find myself with 2 copies of Voyage Home in a vehicles deck, I'm picking up every single one of these that I see because there's an artifact that draws you a card. Really cool design. All right, Marshall's Path Cruiser. This is a cool one. I am a sucker for this kind of effect. I'm a sucker for bad fixing, bad effect that lets you pay 5 mana for a thing. You probably seen me throw away my Kaldheim drafts because of Path of the World tree. But I tried my best to give it an objective rating. I love this card and I will be playing it more than is healthy. But it's just okay. Yes, Crew 5 is absurd. Like if you're a huge pilot deck, go for it. But like you don't want to count on crewing this. You don't want to play this card unless you want the basic land on turn 3. And plan to use this 5 mana. The thing is, this is achievable in this set. This is a weirdly paradoxical set where like I wouldn't go 3 colors, but you can get to this off of cards like your Boost Buggy, right? Like if I'm a red green vehicles deck and I have 2 Rocketeer Boost Buggies, there's also a mount in red that generates treasures on attack. That is just a good card. Like there's enough good ways to get treasures. That this is not outside the realm of possibility. It's just not trivial, right? Like the situation you want the Path Cruiser in is if you're a 2-color deck with a light splash of a 3rd color and the ability to generate other colors incidentally, right? Like you don't even want to be like if I'm a red green deck with a light blue splash for some bombs, I'm not playing a swamp and a plains. But I will have ways that I can do this. Also, if I'm a Guidelight Matrix deck, if I'm a deck like blue-white affinity with 3 Guidelight Matrixes, we'll play this card. This card is not an archetypal card. It's a situational card. When you have the ways to fix your mana, or when you have the ways to crew vehicles without tapping 5 power worth of creatures, then you can play this. Hi Hendozy, how you doing? This is true, Carl. So like this is a situational card, not an archetypal one. But I gave it a 4 with a floor of 3, a ceiling of 6, and medium effort. And Hendozy, I'm doing hellos and answering questions between slides. We're doing some recording today. Yes, this is fun mana fixing. Pit Automaton. So I gotta say, they nailed the colorless cards. Like they have not been doing a good job. Like Foundation's colorless cards and even Duskmourn colorless cards, which I love Duskmourn as a set, they have not been doing a good job on. They did a really good job this time. Like these are all interesting without being overcomplicated, situational without the situations being too narrow as to have a place. Pit Automaton's a really good example. 2 mana 0/4 reasonable wall. There's lots of 3 power creatures. Blocking is important and relevant. It's not the best blocker, but sometimes it's the blocker you'll have. But tapping for 2 mana for only activated abilities is really cool. Like, it's not good by itself, but in the exhaust deck, that's a lot of mana for your 2-drop. Mighty. Like, I am not sure how situational this is. This is one of the cards that might go up based on the rares. So I haven't looked at all the rares yet. Like, I did a cursory glance at the exhaust ones and the vehicles just for counts. But this is a cool card. It's all about what your exhaust abilities are. So if you have exhaust that kills a creature, like, I wouldn't necessarily want to do this just to grow a creature. But I do it to draw a card or bounce a creature. And then this mana is very good. Like, don't build it around the bottom ability. Build it around the middle ability. This mana is more valuable than this activation until very late in the game. But really cool card. The revisit is based on how good the rares are. Like, if you have, I saw at least 2 rares with crazy. Ramping to them 2 mana ahead of schedule is crazy good. Ooh, I love Kaikar is so cool. Like, I was playing with Kaikar and Chromatic Cube. Oh man, really good time. But Hindozi, so we're almost done with today's portion of the draft set review. So I'll answer any questions you have, and then we'll talk about. I would love to talk more about your Kaikar deck as soon as I finish. I'm almost done. Kaikar's a cool new commander. All right, up next we've got the Racing Scoreboard. This card's bad. Avoid playing it if you can. Turn 4 is too late to start your engines and have it be something you are interested in doing. Drawing a card when you come in is nice, still not strong. If this is your only start your engines card, then on turn 4, you are like, this doesn't facilitate starting your revving your engine at all. It doesn't facilitate building your speed at all. If you like, it doesn't work. This card just doesn't do what you wanted to do. It doesn't get your speed up. The ceiling of a 3 was when I thought there was a blank. We're dropping that ceiling to a 2. Like, 4 mana to draw 2 cards and discard a card is how this will usually play. You're not actually going to get the spell reduction to be relevant. This is a constructed combo card. It is probably pretty good in Commander, but I mean, it's playable in Commander. But no, this is a very weak card. If this were 2 mana, I'd play it for sure because of the draw card. This would be awesome at 2 mana. If it was just 2 mana, draw a card, start your engines, max speed, your spells cost 1 less to cast. Like, I'd play that. But no, this is not playable. I was looking, if you find a purpose for this, please tell me. Like, there's not even like a decoction module combo you can build with it. This one I came back and raised the score. This card's awesome. This is, how have we never seen an equipment vehicle before? That's so cool. So it's a 3 mana 2/2 vehicle and equipment. You do need other creatures with it and play with it. So it has the same this is not a creature. It has the same diminishing returns problem that other vehicles have. But there are lots of ways to grow in this set. And there's not a lot of ways to have double strike. But equipping to give this having double strike and giving something else double strike is really cool. Like, it won't be at the same time. You can make it fall out. If you can still crew it while it's on a creature and it will fall off. Oh, it says at the bottom, creatures can't be attached to other permanents. I like that they added that to the reminder text. But yeah, this card is very cool. I will take the first copy at a 6. It has diminishing returns. After the first copy, I'm less likely to take it. The reason that I have it so high, this is the only equipment in the set, and there are lots of random bodies. There's not a lot of ways to turn those random bodies into relevant threats. Riverblades is one of the only ones. But yeah, that's cool. I don't hate arbitrary rules, Ranger. I feel like it's important to remind people of the arbitrary rules, like creatures can't be attached to things. But yeah, it's a really cool card. I wonder what the difference is. Like, the equipment and vehicles, like if you're wearing the shoes, what makes it an equipment versus a vehicle? Like, I guess if it's a vehicle, like it still needs to be driven. You still need a pilot for it. Yeah, the equipment planeswalker, that's true. There is one other equipment at Mythic. But I was only looking at commons and uncommons, Dragon Jack. Also, hey buddy. Up next, Scrap Compactor. So this is something they put into every set now, and it is the bad removal card. You need removal. If you don't have removal, play the Scrap Compactor. If you hold hands, and you hold hands, you put 1 foot in one rollerblade and then 1 foot in the other rollerblade. It's like a 3-legged race, but with rollerblades. All right, sorry. Scrap Compactor. This is bad removal. You sometimes need removal. When you don't have removal, you still have to play this card. Okay. It's I gave it a 2 with a floor of a 2. That ceiling of a 4. You take it at a 4 when you don't have the removal. It's not early, but like you don't take it early. But sometimes in pack 3, you'll be like, oh shit, I only have 3 ways to deal with creatures in my whole deck, and then you can grab a couple Scrap Compactors to save your deck. The thing about Scrap Compactor so it's your desperate removal spell. However, Azorius will still play this as an affinity enabler. You can play it on turn. It's one of the only 1 mana artifacts in the set. So you play it, it sits in play. You can kill something with it later. I'm gonna raise it to a 3 because it's good in Azorius. It's playable bad removal. Something has gone wrong if you have to play this card as a removal spell, but it's better than things just going wrong irreparably. Yeah, cool card, good design. Skybox Fairy. I am usually pretty happy to play anything niche that cycles. So like a 5 mana 4/4 flying vehicle that crews is pretty average. But a 5 mana 4/4 flyer is just good. It's a good, like, so when this is a 5 mana 4/4 flyer, because you have a few pilots lying around or some creatures that you're looking to to crew with, then you get to play this card pretty happily. Otherwise, you just cycle it. I'm happy to cycle it. Hey, Diminishing Serenity. I just found one of you in a box of cards. Yeah, I gave it a 4 with a floor of a 3 and a ceiling of 5. There's obviously better 5 drops, but cycling adds a lot to the playability of a card. Starting column. So this is specifically mana fixing in a deck that wants to start its engines. If you think you can get to max speed reliably, then and you need the fixing, then go ahead and play it. Otherwise, it's pretty weak fixing. I do love fixing that lets you replace it later. Nomad MTG, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that. But yeah, it's very niche. So if we go back to our categories, start your engines cards, this is the ignore. Like it, or I guess it's an inevitable. Like you play a normal game, eventually you'll be able to get rid of it, turn it into new cards. Thanks for the follow, Nomad. I'm trying to address people between slides. Okay. Oh, and sorry you didn't get the emote explosions. That is attached to I turned those off just for this because we export this to YouTube. All right. Ticket Tortoise. What a card. I love the flavor of this one. So in a normal set, having Defender would be a big loss. In this set, we need to saddle things and crew things. So we're pretty happy with a Defender is less of a problem on this card than it would be in other sets. In best of 3, I'll take these pretty high. If you're on the draw, then a 2 mana 3/1 that crews and saddles and generates a treasure is going to be a 5. You're going to be so happy with it. That floor of a 2 is well, when you're on the play or if you're an aggressive deck. But it trades up. 1 toughness is a bit of a liability, but I'm pretty happy with a Defender that crews things well. And that treasure is incredibly valuable in this set. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and raise the floor because I'm pretty happy to play this in Azorius because generating 2 permanents is really good for affinity and it's a good defender. Really, I just don't want it in blue-red or in red-white. No, I'm gonna leave it like I had it. Yeah, cool card. It's a great pilot that generates an extra permanent. And that rectangle is really important. That treasure matters a lot. Walking Sarcophagus. This is not the best way to start your engines, but if you are a dedicated start your engines deck, you need like 4 or 5 or 6 minimum ways to start your engine. I'd say you want 5 ways to start your engine by turn 2 minimum. So like this is a bad 2-1 that starts your engines, and sometimes you're gonna need that. But this is not the best way to do it. We'll talk about the good ways to do it shortly. Wreck Remover, 4 mana, 3/4. This is a good sideboard card to know about. If in your sealed pool, keep an eye on this. Like at your pre-release, check your sideboard, keep track of the Wreck Removers, because if you need having cycling on Graveyard Hate is relevant. But it's not main deckable, but it is an important and relevant sideboard card. Like cycling just does so much to make this card playable. J1, hey buddy, good to see ya. I think there might also be like a black-green cycling deck that just tries to put as many creatures in the graveyard as possible, and it's solid there too. Thank you so much for the sub. It's good to see you, buddy. So that's it for the artifacts. Looks like we have an unskippable ad in 60 seconds. So we're gonna go ahead and run that now. And I'm gonna say hi to J1. Hey buddy, it's good to see you. How you doing? Yeah, it's way better than I expected. I was very down on this set from the spoilers. Like, I'm like, I might stop, because I might not do the set review for Spider-Man, because that's the next set. Ooh, that's the next RC. I didn't get to play in any RCs, so I gotta get on that. It's standard or modern? If it's modern, I might make an effort. But yeah, this set looks good. It looks like a lot of fun. I might try and get in on that. I'll see. What's the date on Portland? Is that this weekend? There's no. I guess there's not going to be RCs that feed into it currently. Okay, never mind. I want to qualify for the next season after this one. That was my goal. But yeah, I didn't have any. I worked every weekend for 7 months. July, August, September, October, November, December, 6 months. I worked every weekend for 6.5 months, and then they laid me off. Cool. I've got my Green Sun Zenith, and Yogg is a playable deck, even if there's energy everywhere. Yeah, but this set feels really good. Like, I think that this is the biggest flavor fail. Shit. What was the last mechanical flavor fail this big? Maybe ever? Let's go with ever. But it plays so well. It's a cool, interesting way to play this game, but in terms of what it's meant to represent, it doesn't work. I don't know, Comment. This one might, for all the problems, they nailed vehicles. Vehicles are really interesting and fun in this set. I love the vehicles in this set. I think they really got it. So like, for instance, the flavor for Duskmourn did not click for me, but it seems that it did for some people. The flavor is not clicking for me on this set. That's not true though. Like, I think the flavor works, just not the way they tried to depict it. Like, the race is not a race. The race is a marathon. And if they did it, if it felt like they were trying to make me think it was a marathon, who here's Red Steel Ball Run? We'll talk. Hang on. All right. Comment. Hold that question. Hold that thought, because I want to talk about it. But we still have a few cards left to go. All right. Lastly, we have the lands. So there are 3 lands that start your engines. These are very important for the more aggressive start your engines decks. I'm gonna go ahead and raise the ceilings on them because of how important they are. Like if I'm red black aggro start your engines, this is my most important card. If I am a more controlling start your engines deck, this is my most important card. But they're only good in that style of deck. Starting your engine on turn 1 is an incredibly valuable thing for an aggressive deck. So Amonkhet Raceway, I gave it a 4, floor of a 3, ceiling of a 6. The faster you need to start your engines, you need a critical mass of cards that have the word start your engines on it for the start your engines decks. And putting them on lands is an important way to reach that. The max speed, tap target creature gains haste, that's gravy. Like if this was just start your engines, add colorless, the rating would still be pretty close. It would just have a lower ceiling. This one, the Aetherdrift Raceway, is a little bit better, mainly because the ability is better late in the game. Having loot rummage on your land is so good. I'll be taking this card pretty high. I'll be taking this card after I'm a start your engines deck. But yeah, they're both cool and strong cards. We're gonna talk about flavor in a minute. We've only got a few cards left. Night Market, Evolving Wilds has gotten out of control. This card is so good, okay? Like, I know it's unassuming, but don't feel bad if you first pick this card. Mana bases in draft are bad inherently. You will always play an Evolving Wilds. This is an Evolving Wilds that you don't need to have the basic in your deck for, and it cycles. Like, you would play this card if it just had cycling. I would play a colorless cycling. Like, this is an Evolving Wilds with cycling. It's incredibly powerful. It goes into every single deck you will play, the whole format. You'll take it a little bit higher if you need it, but like, seeing these go around the table late is how you know your draft table is inexperienced. Best common? I think this is the best common. It's up there for sure. Like, I know it's unassuming, but don't underestimate it. It's incredibly strong. Yeah, just it's a land that you don't mind drawing in the late game, and because you just cycle it. It's really good. All right, all 5 pilot lands. I gave them different ratings, but we're going to talk about them together. So they all say the same thing. This land enters tapped unless you control a mount or vehicle, and then they make a pilot. This, having your land do something later is nice. But tapped lands, so thank you, Carl. Tapped lands are a problem. So these cards aren't balanced around the fact that they make a pilot. They're balanced around how likely they are to come in tapped. So like, the thing is, on turn 1 is the one time you're always okay with a tapped land. So if you have these on turn 1, that's great, it's fine. But on turn 4, turn 5, you will also need these to be untapped. It's okay if you have them on turn 3 or turn 4 and they're like, you will have other lands, but like, if this is untapped, if this is tapped on turn 1, untapped on turn 4, it is a good card for you. If it is tapped on 1 and tapped on 4, then you can't play this. But if you are, like, we talked a lot about the danger of having a vehicle that is uncrewed or uncrewable. So like, the thing is, if I have 3 mana up with a Guidelight Pathmaker out, my opponent still can't attack their 4/4 if I have this land in play. So these lands are viable as a threat. I'm raising some of the ceilings because I wanted to put most of the ceilings at 5. These lands are viable as a threat of activation to turn your vehicles into blockers. You don't really want to cash in a land for a 1/1 even in the late game, but the option is relevant and strong. So these aren't easy to work with. I need to raise all the difficulties. Hold up. So medium to medium. Low to medium, medium to high. But if you have the 3 and 4 mana vehicles, then it's very good. And so the ratings are directly representative of how likely you are to have the 3 and 4 mana vehicles on all of these in these colors. They also have diminishing returns. Yeah, it is. Like, but like, they're not, the thing is, these aren't meant to represent, the ratings aren't meant to represent how good they are as cards in your deck. They're meant to represent the pick order. So like I'll probably throw the first, I think one tap land is always going to be safe. Second tap land is usually going to be safe. But like if I have 4 of these, I'm not going to bother with them. And if I have a few of these, like the green and the white ones, well, less so the green ones, but the white and the blue ones are usually going to be untapped. You can play more of them. And you have to be flooding pretty bad that you're happy with a pilot. But you're going to have situations in your blue-white vehicles deck where you have 2 Guidelight Pathmakers in play and nothing to crew them. And it's nice having the ability to mitigate that risk on a land. Like I still gave them 4s, 3s and 4s. They're not strong cards, but they're role players. If you don't think you can keep your creatures alive to crew your vehicles or saddle your mounts, then you're a little more likely to play them. And the thing is, so in this format, the more vehicles you have, in your deck, the fewer creatures you will have in your deck, and the more it's going to be kind of intuitive. The more likely these are to come into play, untapped, the more you'll need them, or at least want them. All right, so the last thing we have is something that I completely forgot to make the slides for. And that is Taplands. So the Taplands in this set, there's 10 of them. Scoured Barrens, Jungle Hollow, come into play, they gain 1 life. There's no life gain payoffs. Like there's nothing that says, hey, whenever you gain life, put a counter on it. You should pretty much just treat these as dual lands. So like in Foundations, which was the last place we got them, you would take these because Black-White had so many good life gain payoffs. And in the previous set, OTJ, Outlaw of the Thunder Junction, was just available to draft. You had deserts, and you would take them just because the type desert was relevant. It's not the case for these. You only take them if you're trying to splash a color or if you are these colors. And then you're pretty happy to have them. So like slide wise, they'd probably be 2s or 3s with a ceiling of 5. And that 5 is when they are on color. So like they're less complicated in this set than they have been in others. All right. So that is going to do it for the set review for today. I'm going to try and cover all 5 colors on Thursday. If I can't, I will have a stream on Friday before the bazaar to cover the remaining colors. But I want to get this done before your pre-release. So we are going to either do all 5 colors on Thursday, assuming my voice holds out. If my voice doesn't hold out for all 5 colors, we will do 3 colors on Thursday and the last 2 Friday before our bazaar stream. We're going to try and grab top Grandmaster in the bazaar this week. And then tomorrow is early access. So if you want to see this set played,